Grüß, willkommen in einem freckens video, or welcome to yet another exciting video, in this case part 9 of my organisational series. In this case I'll be providing a view of the French World War II division's combat strength. I'll be using a World War II figure gaming set of rules to determine combat strengths, and as a result I'll be using the points system from the Corps Commander set of rules. This point system is based largely on physical attributes of the various weapon systems, such as armour thickness, gun penetration rates, rate of fire, speed, special combat features, and so on. The main formation I'll be focusing on is the battalions. Companies will be included when there are support formations or when it's unavoidable, but I'll be providing the combat strengths of the various battalions within the divisions. A quick point. Viewers need to understand that 100 points of tanks will operate very differently from 100 points of infantry. Thus, comparing tank battalions with infantry battalions need to be done through a subjective filter. However, comparing a tank battalion in 1940 with one in, let's say, 1945 of a different nationality is certainly valid, or comparing different tank battalions within the same year but between different divisions is also quite comparative or quite reasonable. This shows the simple breakdown that I'll be using to show people the strengths of the various battalions and also regiments when applicable. After the formation names, there are two values shown here. The first is the Corps Commander points value, with the second being the value divided by 250. The points value gives you an idea of the combat capability of that formation, with the second value provided for clarity. The reason why I have two values is that it must be remembered that while figure gaming point systems provide a rough way of ensuring points mixes are balanced, they can never be perfect. If one formation is 1,000 points and the other is 1,001, it does not mean the latter will win any conflict. As a result, it's best to look at this value several orders of magnitude higher. Thus, dividing by 250 gives you a simpler value, where a value of 2 is clearly inferior to a value of 3. Unlike my other videos on the topic, France was only in the war for a short period of time, so I won't be comparing divisions or formations over the entire length of the war. I'll just be basically looking at the strength of the various divisions at the beginning of the war and giving you an idea of what those values are and how they compare with each other, and then later comparing them with other nationalities. The first French involvement in World War II was the Saar Offensive in September 1939. The next involvement was the Norwegian Offensive in 1940. Then this was shortly followed by the German invasion of France in May 1940. The last conflict was the Italian invasion of France in June 1940. The bedrock of any army is the infantry divisions, and the infantry divide their infantry divisions into three series. The A series was the best equipped and had the highest level of training. The French infantry division was reasonably well structured and equipped, even if smaller than the German equivalent. This was especially the case for the Series A infantry division. The B series infantry division was equipped generally as well as the A series, although some of them did lack anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons at the beginning of the war. The only main difference was the troops had a higher number of reservists as per regular troops. Because the primary difference was the training levels of the troops, the combat strengths of the B and A is similar. The final infantry division, the C series divisions, were mainly manned by reservists, as well as having slightly less equipment in many cases. The main equipment difference was a reduction in the artillery force. In the field, many of these divisions also lacked their anti-tank battalions. Another type of infantry division was the field light divisions, this one being a colonial type, which was of extremely high quality. The light divisions were very similar to the C series infantry divisions, lacking one artillery battalion. The colonial divisions were of a very high quality. The standard light infantry divisions were weaker than the colonial variety, as well as being less experienced. The standard French light division did not possess a 105mm howitzer battalion, and its artillery was comparatively minimalistic or weak. Another type of foot division was the field mountain divisions, and that they were placed on the front facing Italy. These divisions performed very well in their brief fight with the Italians. The French mountain divisions were unusually large for mountain divisions and well equipped, possessing 155mm howitzers. Yet another type of foot division was the Special Division, which was formed for the Norwegian campaign, which had specific skills in terms of skiing. The DLCH or Light Chasseur divisions were small but highly specialist troops. I would also suggest highly motivated and highly experienced. The first of the motorised divisions were the motorised infantry divisions. These were all considered Series A, thus contained a high proportion of regular troops. The motorised division contained a number of company-sized support formations divided into divisional and regimental groupings. I've combined both together, but this contained anti-tank and engineering assets. This formation contained strong infantry battalions with good support and with an armoured battalion, making it, in theory, a very effective division. The French field mechanised cavalry divisions, which in theory could have been very effective mechanised divisions if the cavalry were left behind, were quite numerous. There were many different structures, this being the first DLC structure. This division contained the mechanised infantry, which were carried in a tracked armoured personnel carrier, good mix of infantry and armour, but lacking artillery support, and most of the battalions were reasonably small. The next DLC divisional structure, the second DLC division, differed in the way its artillery was equipped. In this case, the main difference was the replacement of a 75mm gun battalion with a 105mm howitzer battalion, increasing its artillery capacity. The next structure, the third and fourth DLC, could be probably considered the standard DLC structure of the French army, as two divisions shared the same TO&E. This divisional structure had the divisional support weaker, but was otherwise the same as the second DLC. I'm guessing the French were experimenting on the optimal structure for these divisions, thus the plethora of different structures. The French were not complete with their experimentation and created yet another structure for the fifth DLC. This was formed during the invasion and was probably different because it could only take the formations that were available at the time. The divisional support was beefed up to match the first and second DLC division. The other change was the motorised battalion was beefed up as well, giving it greater combat strength. In my opinion, the best armoured divisions the French fielded were the DLM divisions, which possessed a good infantry armour mix. In this divisional structure, the French possessed a lot of company-sized support formation, grouped into divisional support and brigade support. Why the brigade support formations were under divisional HQ is a mystery to me. I suspect the division HQ allocated these resources out as required to the brigades. The artillery regiment was reasonable for a French formation. The real strength was the mechanised battalions, which were very effective and reasonably large. The division contained the excellent S-35 medium tank, although their numbers were reasonably small. As we discovered, the French liked to experiment, and so as a result, when they formed the third DLM, the structure was changed. In this case, the 105mm howitzer battalion was removed, which I think was possibly an error, but maybe there was some other factors that I'm not aware which forced this. On the other hand, a cuirassier armoured reconnaissance regiment was added, which really beefed up its armour capacity. Even the fourth DLC involved additional changes and TO&E modifications. In this structure, the artillery was absent from the division, but an armoured reconnaissance regiment was added. This was probably created from whatever formations were available at the time, which probably explains why there's no artillery. The seventh DLM was also formed during the invasion and was once again made up of formations which were available. In this structure, the divisional support was reduced, but the artillery was added again and was reasonably powerful. Finally, the armour is almost non-existent, so this particular structure went wildly in the opposite direction, less armour and a lot more artillery. Most, at the time, considered the French DCR divisions as the main or primary armoured forces in the French armour. However, when you actually look at these in great detail, they were very unbalanced divisions. Apart from a single artillery battalion and one, I must admit, good mechanised infantry battalion, this division lacked non-armoured support. The armoured battalions were reasonable, but even though the Char B1 was a good heavy tank, their numbers do not allow the heavy tank battalion to have a truly mega powerful formation or number, as you can see here. The 3rd DCR was basically similarly structured, but did contain an additional medium tank battalion. In this case, the division support was weakened, but the heavy tank regiment contained an extra medium tank battalion, which even increased the unbalanced nature of this formation. The 4th DCR was a hastily raised division and made up of whatever formations the French could pull together at the time. The primary changes to this version of the DCR division was related to divisional and regimental support, as well as the addition of a cavalry reconnaissance battalion attached to the division. It was probably overall the most powerful of all the DCR divisions the French raised. We can't compare the development of the battalions within the division over the period of the war, but we can compare some of the battalions against, let's say, Italian battalions to see how they compare. When we compare the most common and important formations, there's not much difference between the two nationalities. The French mounted battalions are significantly larger. In the light tank area, the only reason why the Italian tankette battalion is more powerful is due to sheer numbers of tankettes. In terms of the actual vehicles, the French light tank was significantly better. In fact, all their tanks were significantly better. The medium tank battalions are of a similar strength, but once again, the Italian medium tank battalions are much larger, resulting in equality in terms of combat strength. The French medium tank is, as with the light tank, a far superior tank. The Italians lacked a heavy tank, so I'm not including that formation comparison here. Just want to clarify, I'm not factoring in quality, that is training, morale, supply, things of that nature. Clearly the French were in a better position in that area compared with the Italians. I'm only talking about raw combat power based on the equipment within each battalion. It would have been rather interesting what the French would have done if they had been not knocked out of the conflict so quickly. During the German invasion, they displayed extraordinary levels of innovation. A lot of emergency army vehicles were under development, some of which were rather advanced in concept. Unfortunately, this was never to be. The country surrendered before any of this stuff could be actually deployed in the field in any kind of meaningful numbers. And so we come to the end of part 9 of my video series on organisation, in this case analysing the French army in World War II, specifically the estimated combat strength of the battalions which made up the divisions. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.